Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Phoenix Gaming. I am your host, Nick Henning, and today we are going to be doing the Raw World Series of Board Gaming 2023 Ring Final Commentary. At this table, we have Loyd, who's sitting in seat 1, I believe. Loyd was the winner of Raw in 2022, and so, a game that has a fairly high amount of variance it's clearly indicated that skill is very important here. Lee, I believe, is in seat 2 and is probably, I don't actually really know anything about Lee, so if anybody does, feel free to drop some information in the comments for me. David was the 2022 Ticket to Ride winner, and Ted Evans in seat 4 was also at the Acquire final table. So clearly we've got a bunch of people that are playing this game that really know what it is that they're doing. And I think of the WSBG games, Raw is one of the ones that folks are least prepared for because it's not on Board Game Arena. I'm actually pretty decent at this game. I don't have any specific special qualifications, but I've played it enough that I have a good sense of what's going on. Hopefully we'll be able to battle the glare of the lights. The tiles in Raw, just for some reason, are pretty glary, but we will see how that goes. By the way, you can watch this video on the Dice Tower channel if you want to see with the original commentary. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and dive into Raw. And Loyd's going to kick us off here by drawing a soft Raw tile. I call it a soft Raw when it's a kind of a forced bid, and of course everybody's just going to pass here. There's no reason to get involved in this bid at all with nothing in the lot and a 1 available in play. Can't quite make out what that draw is right there. That's far too glossy for me, but we'll maybe be able to see it in a second. I think that second draw from David was a God tile. God tiles are really sweet because you are allowed to, if you haven't finished for the round, you still have at least 1 bidding token left. You can swap them for something in play and grab like one very important thing. And Loyd is going to put out his 2 here, saying that he is casually cool with grabbing this lot here. He recognizes that it's not very good. He's going to use his weakest bidding tile. And Lee is going to go over top with his weakest bidding tile, which I think was a 5. Yeah, it was a 5. The other 2 players can't use their weakest bidding tiles, and no one's willing to use their middle tile, and so he will go ahead and grab it. And I was wrong about it being a God tile. What it actually looks like it was maybe a civilization tile. So a civ tile, if you don't have any of them, are worth -5 points at the end of the turn, because when Knizia designed this game, we were cool with negative points still. An easier way to think about it is like getting 5 points for that tile, and then it looks like that other one was maybe a Pharaoh tile. So the Pharaoh tile is going to score if you have the most, or negative if you have the least at the end of the round. I'm really not going to be able to make out, I think, what these tiles are from that glare. So we're going to have to kind of guess and talk about things as they bid on them. But one thing that's really actually super interesting that's happening right now is we've drawn a lot of Raw tiles so far. Those red tiles at the top of the track moving things down. In some ways, Raw is a push your luck game, and currently what the game has told them is there is not going to be time to push your luck in this. We're already almost halfway through the round, and it's highly variable when the round will end, but you really want to make sure you're getting your 3 bids of what it is that you're doing before the end there. And it looks like Ted picked up a civilization tile and then like a flood or a Nile tile. I think it's a Nile tile because it's on the left side of his board. So not going to score him anything. We got a couple monuments coming out. At least they're very easy to see. Don't reflect on that glare. That's super interesting that purple rejects the light there. So that will at least be helpful because those are the ones with the most unique pictures that we need to be able to distinguish. This is quite a nice set actually right now with 2 of the same tile to the same monument. It means that when the 3rd monument comes out later, it's going to be worth 5 points to you. A 4th monument worth another 5 points. So once you have 2, every subsequent monument of the same type is going to be worth a decent chunk of points. And David says, you know what? I like that. Loyd saw that the set was good enough, so he decided to call Raw. And David took it with a middling bid, which makes a lot of sense here. It's not spicy enough to do anything really exciting. Looks like it also came with a flood tile, which will score him 1 point and then plus a point for every Nile he picks up on the way here, which won't be too many. So mostly it was a middling bid for some, end game bonus points, which I think is a pretty respectable choice in a round where time has gone on really, really quickly. By time, I mean those red raw tiles that are counting down to the end of the round there. So they're doing great. Just FYI, I am playing this video at plus 20% speed right now. Maybe I should have done it at less. You can see Loyd's frustration with all these soft raw tiles as he flicks out that 2 there. And his crappy 2 gets boxed out. And someday he's going to have to commit to using a proper middle tile to win something. David here sees the end coming and is happy to use his 4 to pick up what looks like a civilization tile, which will score him 5 points, and a Nile tile, which is another one. So it's a 6-point pickup for him for a low bid, which is a very, very good deal at this stage where we're getting close to running out of time very, very quickly. We've still got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bids left that players want to win before the end of the round, and only 4 soft raws that are going to come out. So the players are going to probably want to aggressively call raw to make sure that they're getting something. And we see that's exactly what Ted's thinking about right now. He's saying, if I call raw and everyone passes, am I okay taking this lot with a 7? Because the players, they want to incentivize everybody else to buy things so that they can get stuff. But Ted's also in an interesting position where he's got the 12. He's got the second best set. Loyd has the 13, which is the best set or the best bid that could be out there. And so in some ways, I think that Loyd could kind of push it. Like an interesting choice he could have made here was put out a 5th tile. Just say this lot's awesome and I'm going to buy it with my 13. And that's the way that it is. But instead, Loyd wants to force other players into making decisions, which is why he's not getting any lots, because he's got a bad low and middle starting tile, because he's got the best high starting tile. And Lee says, you know what, I'm perfectly content to put out a pretty good, the best middle bid there is at the 9. So if you guys want to come over top me, you're gonna have to use the best tile that you have out there. Can't quite see what it is, but it looks like it's kind of a smattering of different things there. We'll have to tell when people put them on their board. And of course, a very obvious Sphinx, which is, 1 point for everybody right now. It'll be worth a single point at the end of the game, unless someone manages to stack up on multiple Sphinxes or have quite a wide array of different monuments. I think maybe David passed. He looks like he's kind of staring into the distance and Ted is thinking. So that's my sense of what's going on right now. And then we have it on to Loyd, who's decided that he will bid the 13 for the set. The fact that he's decided that he'll bid the 13 for a set makes me feel like it was a mistake for Loyd to not draw another tile out of the bag. If he was willing to bid the 13 on it, he should have just increased the value of that pile so that he could have purchased it on the next turn. So I'm not sure if he thought other players maybe wouldn't buy it. I guess in part because everyone else has a civilization, so he thought that they would value it pretty low. But the problem is that time is running out. So he needs that civ. That's 5 points, Nile tile, Pharaoh tile, and that Sphinx there. So this is like a 6-point bid, but maybe more, some speculation, some setup. It's a fine little lot, but it's not what you want to be getting with your 13 tiles. That's a little bit of a bummer for Loyd. David and Ted and Lee all continue to push more things out here, and Loyd continues to be the person who's just going to be calling raw over and over again. At this point, Loyd can only get bad lots, so he really wants to be calling raw from this point forward to make sure that other players are forced into using their tiles so that hopefully he can use his low number tiles. That's kind of the other challenge of him having used the 13 in the previous round. My cat's wanting a lot of attention right now. Looks like Lee's going to win that with his good mid tile, and that's a pretty sick pickup for him because he swaps the 9 for a 13 next turn, so he'll have absolute control next turn if there's a lot that he wants to take. Picking up a second Pharaoh tile might make him the leader of Pharaohs at the end of the first round. It's a little tough to tell because we were talking about how quickly the time went down, but since that's happened, we haven't drawn any more soft raws. And so suddenly we find ourselves in a position where players were pretty aggressively picking up lots, and maybe the round is just going to slow down at this point in time. Give them all a chance to catch up. Lee, at this point, with the 2 Pharaohs, really is actually hoping to draw for a lot of, soft raws so that he actually can get the 5 points for being the lead Pharaoh pretty early. Whew, I'm running out of breath. These guys are moving. 20% speed was a mistake. Let's go. All right. Looks like Loyd here again calls a hard raw. I call it a hard raw when a player calls a hard raw. Hard just meaning that someone is required to pick up the bid. The raw caller, a soft raw being when a red raw tile is pulled from the bag where people have the chance to bid but are not required to bid by the end. Ted here says, I'll happily take it with the 7. Loyd unfortunately means that he's boxed out. And Ted picks up a Nile and a couple monuments. That's not a great set to pick up, right? That at most this is going to be like 3, 4, 5-ish points, depending on how many times he triggers those Niles. Yeah, it's not the most exciting get, but for a 7 when time is running low, it might just be what he can get. So yeah, I think if I was in Ted's shoes, I would probably be a little bit greedier. But, when you're greedy and things blow up, you can really fall behind. So the play that he chose certainly is going to be one that's going to make him not fall behind early. And then looks like Lee's going to drop out a 10 here for a couple. I think those are maybe some more Pharaoh tiles. He wants to be god of the Pharaohs. And David's going to put in the 11 for the get here. And then we can see what it is. He's getting a little bit of diversity in his monuments. And I think it's a double Pharaoh. So his ideal, it is a double Pharaoh. His ideal is that Lee does not get any more Pharaohs. And that they can both tie for the 5 points. That's a little bit of a hopeful thing for him at this stage. Ooh, looks like that was a catastrophe. At least we can see the red lines of those. So suddenly that lock got really bad. So that'd be the ideal for David, but I think he actually may have been more concerned about Lee picking up 4 Pharaohs, because if Lee picks up 4 Pharaohs and everyone else has none or like 1, it's basically like a nearly insurmountable position right from the beginning of the game. Being like King Pharaoh from the beginning of the game, getting, if Lee was in the position where he got 4 Pharaohs, is an easy 15 points because it's 5, 5, 5 for the subsequent rounds, and it becomes, other players are so disincentivized from taking Pharaohs in future rounds that it becomes really easy to just kind of stay ahead and not have to like bid too much to take control of that. It's not as simple as that, but I think coming out with a really huge Pharaoh lead is a very terrifying position. I wonder if that was what David had considered in that bid as well. If he doesn't get the sort of like Pharaoh tie there, it's a little bit rough. David, by the way, you'll notice isn't playing anymore because he's done all 3 of his bids. So he's nodding with joy there as he sees that red tile come out because he wants this round to end as fast as possible. He's gotten in and gotten out, and he needs this game to end ASAP. The fact that a disaster tile came out was really good for David because a disaster tile, whatever disaster tile it is, I can't see which one it is, means that the players are disincentivized from taking this a lot. So that means they're going to draw more tiles from the bag. Drawing more tiles from the bag means that we're getting closer to the end of the round. And we see this soft raw being called, and Ted here is mulling over. Is this going to be the last time I can buy something? Now, if that disaster is like a Pharaoh killer and he doesn't have any Pharaohs, for Ted, it's this is all just frosting, right? Like he could grab those 2 similar monuments and set up for, hopefully some future monuments that'll give him 5 points every time he gets one of those, I don't know, we'll call it the double square castle or something like that. But he decides it's not worth it. I guess actually all the players have decided they don't want to bid. So that disaster tile must be something pretty gnarly. Yeah, another raw draw here is amazing for David. Loyd again, flippantly throwing out the 2. Things are not quite going his way. I think I don't know what the lot is exactly because I can't see with the glare of the details. So we'll see when someone picks this up. But I think he maybe should have bid on this prior because he's got 2 low bids here, and let's see what it is. So he's got the 2 monuments. The disaster is a Civ disaster, so it's -5 points to pick it up. I see. So he has chosen to get the second Pharaoh tile, hoping that the will be a Pharaoh tie, which it looks like it's about to be. So he lost 5 points for the Civ, but because the Pharaohs squared up, he's going to get 5 points for tying for first for the Pharaohs. So he will have lost no points in that, gotten himself an extra Pharaoh tile, and gotten himself those pair of monuments. So that was actually a really good get for Loyd. But there's no question that David is winning after turn 1 here, having made all 3 of his lot bids, while the other players only made 2 of their lot bids. We can see that Ted's got a pretty even, good set going into the next round. Loyd has a mediocre low set. We'll have to see what David and Lee's look like when they flip over. There's a 3-way tie for Pharaohs, so those players are all going to get 5 points for that. Everyone except for Loyd has a Civ, so Lloyd's going to lose 5 points. So currently we've got Lee and David up 5. And then we're going to score our Niles as well. So the round has ended. Our Niles are going to score just for David. He's the only one with the flood for 2 points there. And that's going to be it. I mean, so basically we've got Lee up 5 points, David up 7 points, and Loyd with a wash. And that's it. We've just got infrastructure beyond that. So David up 7, Lee up 5. Maybe I should make notes of this so I can track over the course of the game. David up 7, Lee's up 5, Loyd's not up any, Ted's not up any. But in terms of infrastructure, we've got Ted with 4 infrastructure slots on the left, none of which are pharaohs. We've got Loyd with 6 infrastructure slots, 2 pharaohs, Lee with 4, 2 pharaohs, and David with 7, 2 pharaohs. So David is certainly up ahead, both in points and in infrastructure here. We see that he has a bunch of crap tiles going into round 2, but he is certainly the lead player right now, pretty much in every metric of the game. I think Ted's probably in the diciest position right now. Ted's actually -2 because he loses 2 points for being Pharaoh loser. And that's probably going to persist through the course of the game. He's almost never going to be Pharaoh leader, and he doesn't have enough infrastructure here to have benefited from having missed out there. Not using the 12 certainly really hurt him on that round. So he missed out pretty painfully there. I think, his only little advantage right now is that he's got more Niles than the other players. So we'll see what happens. There's a lot of time between now and the end of the game. But he's definitely behind. And then Lee, I think, is closest behind David. Loyd's got a little bit more infrastructure than Lee does. But those 5 extra points are going to be pretty significant. Now, an important thing to understand is because that first round was relatively quick, it does imply that our later rounds are going to be a little bit slower because there are more raw tiles out of the bag. So the players need to transition from being in this panic mode, and I think this is one of the things that people suck at in Raw, is realizing that they should transition from this panic mode into a calmer approach. They've got more time. You don't need to just grab whatever as it comes out. And Loyd's going to bid on this lot right here, probably because he's got the 4, a little low bid, and he wants to force other people to either use their low tiles, and maybe he'll even go over top with his lowest tile. Lee decides to indeed use the lowest tile. David is also content with this, but Loyd actually wanted it for the absolute lowest bid. So let's see what he grabs there. He grabs a monument that kind of completes a set a little bit, and a sieve tile. So the sieve tile is 5 points there. It's a 6th point for the monument, maybe a 7th point or an 8th point for that Nile, depending on if he triggers floods once or twice in the game. A nice get for a 4 value tile. That looks like a disaster. I think it's maybe a monument disaster. So that's something that Loyd and David are looking at like, ooh, not ideal because they've got good set. Really, everybody. Lee's the only one who takes the least on the chin for that disaster tile there. So this is gonna be a whole bunch of passes around, obviously, on this soft raw, unless someone's playing negative raw. And here we'll have a monument tile that can get blown up along with that monument disaster. So basically have a null lot still. And now the lot is a null lot, but actually you get to make choices. So this is more than a null lot. Like Loyd looking at this, he could blow up his 2 square castles and triple up on the double statues, which is worth 5 points to him. Now, that's not the dream, but he's the one that's actually probably most interested in this lot currently as is. That doesn't make it valuable, but as we're adding more tiles in there, it's important for us to recognize that Loyd has a smidge of an advantage because that monument disaster lets you choose which 2 tiles you lose. And so having that opportunity there gives you a little bit of flex options. Putting out another pyramid here gives even more, and we see that Loyd is going to go ahead and pull the trigger. He is content to use a 6 to buy this lot. He might use it to blow up that pyramid and the Sphinx if he picks it up and stay and try to build up on the columns with the double square and the double statues. And obviously I can't quite see what those other 2 glare tiles are. I think one of them was a civilization, which is basically useless for Loyd right now, but we'll see what happens here. And Lee's going to throw out the 1, which, frankly is unlikely to go through unless Loyd was just kind of trying to push the game. Because when a player calls hard raw, they're indicating, hey, I'm willing to pay my lowest tile to pick up this lot. But it can come down to it passes back to that player, And they say, you know what? I really was just interested in the game proceeding, like someone buying the slot. I didn't want it to be better. And Loyd's very much in that position. He doesn't want lots to get very good in this game because he doesn't hold the 13, the 10, the 12 like Lee and Ted are. They're the ones that really are in the driver's seat of taking pretty good stuff here. Whew. Loyd and David's tiles are a little bit funny because they have, I think, a sandwich of each other. I think Loyd's got a 6 and a... Is it an 11? Yeah, and it's surrounded by David's 7 and 8. David's like bidding dog at this table right now. He loses every bid to anybody who cares about anything. But Ted decides that he's actually down with it. He blows up the double monuments and is going for a wide array of monuments. That's going to make other people with stacking monuments have a little bit of a harder time as he's incentivized to take things. Yeah, because he blew up the double statues, which makes sense. He sees that Loyd has one, so he's like, all right, I'm not going to get too involved with his... and it looks like it was 2 civs. So for Loyd, the 2 civs, if they were different 2 civs than the civ he has, which I really can't quite tell, having 3 civs that are different is worth plus 5 points, not just not negative 5 points. So you could argue that it's 10 in the model that I'm proposing, where it's not negative 5 and actually is plus 5. But having a second one does not do anything for anybody. So for Ted, that pickup was 5 points for not negative 5 for the civ, 1 point for the monument tile, essentially, that he gained delta over the pickup there. So an okay get for his middle tile, nothing too exciting. Loyd's going to push it again. Looks like we got a pharaoh in there. I'm starting to tell the ones with the green blocks at the bottom with the glare, I think I can interpret as pharaohs, but I really can't tell the difference between the civs and the Niles along the way. Lee's going to put himself up there. It looks like it's another pair of civs. So again, it's hard to evaluate the civ bids for players because some of them are going to be in a position where they're doubling up on their civs, and I really can't tell which one is which unless I was like honing in. So we'll just ignore that for now and hope that it becomes obvious later whether they're taking points for them or not. We might be wrong. This is, I guess, an advantage of listening to the proper audio in advance, but there's only so much time I can dedicate to Phoenix gaming in my life. I'm trying to play catch up as it is anyway, so we'll see where we're at there. All right, we have a pretty big spicy tile there, and Ted throws down his 12 to pick up the 13 that was used by Lee on the previous turn, which to me indicates almost a guaranteed triple civ for him. So it's going to be worth plus 5 points. The extra pharaoh's kind of garbage for him. He's still pharaoh loser, but the Nile or the flood tile there will get him 3 points for triggering his Nile. So it was an 8-point get for the 12, which also transitioned into the 13 bid for next turn. I think Ted is maybe a little bit overvaluing having the really big numbers or like control of the really big numbers because it's not an amazing get for him and there's a lot of time left in the round. He had like a lot more control in bidding and now he's kind of bid loser and there's so much time left in the round. Like things have worked out time-wise really favorably for David. He rushed it last round knowing that time was running out and then it ended quickly after he got out of the round, and then now he's got terrible tiles and the round is saying, okay, well, it's going to go as long as possible, which eventually means that David's going to get to push his luck with his crappy stuff and get involved in the game. Other players at this point might not want to be calling hard raw so often because there are 3, 4, 5, 6, like there's like 7 bids left and like 7 soft raws. Like you can actually just literally let the game tell you when you want to be done. I think that we're calling raw maybe a little bit too aggressively, though I have to assume that when Lee did that, he's also tripling up on civs for plus 5 points. Putting himself in an absolutely commanding position for Pharaoh here is pretty nice. So I can see why he would push that. But yeah, he is now left with just a piddly 1. And just like that, Loyd has become actually big dog at the table with his 11, which means he's just going to be pretty much constantly pulling tiles, making lots as awesome as possible. This draw is a really spicy one for David, as he's got a bunch of monuments that pair up here that no one else really cares about. David's for sure going to bid on this. The question is, what does he bid on it? So I don't think he's too concerned about Ted buying this, because that's a pharaoh, which doesn't do anything for Ted. So he had got to ask himself the question of whether Loyd wants to bid the 6 on this. Oh no, he's going to keep going. Oh, I see. Everybody passed and let Lee take it. That's really interesting. That's really, really interesting. I guess David said, look, I don't want to double up on things. There are actually not any points. Don't want to speculate there. And other people said, all right, Lee, well, you called, or you didn't call raw. It was a soft raw. So he bid a 1 for it. I guess Lee just really wanted to put himself in pharaoh command there and pick up a couple extra points. Interesting. I suppose Lee's kind of like locked in on the pharaoh plan because he doesn't have any Niles. But with all that time left, I don't know if he could have been greedier. I'm surprised that David didn't bid the 3 on it, though. I guess, yeah, he really is saying that he doesn't want the doubles. He really only wants to essentially at this stage be sure he's going to get triples. He's also seen, I think he's seen a pyramid get blown up, and he's seen his like Twin Towers-y obelisk-y thing over on Ted's table. So he's saying, I don't want to mess with that. I'll just get some proper points. And like, we haven't seen things like god tiles and gold tiles that just give proper normal points. And so David could maybe just be focusing on that. We're on Loyd here. We've got 5 tiles in play, and this is what I'm talking about. This round is going along, and like all of a sudden these like crap tiles are going to be some pretty good lots. We're going to see David and Loyd, I think, jockeying for position a lot out here. And looks like he called raw and is going to use the 6 to scoop up a flood tile, some Niles, a lot of Niles. Oh, that's really spicy. And a gold, it looks like. So that's like a 5, 6, 7, 8 point get for Loyd for a 6 slot. So it's like one of the best gets of this entire round. In large part because he's waited. So you in raw, you really need to pay attention to how the round tracker is going. Like, you get rewarded for waiting in a lot of instances. But of course, those random disasters can also throw things in the way. It is a game of variance at the end of the day, but you're evaluating like what you want that push to look like, what the math of those lots looks like. But yeah, I mean, picking up the Nile with or the flood with the 4 Niles is 5 points, 3 points for the gold, and another pharaoh doesn't hurt. I mean, it's gonna certainly keep Loyd out of last place in case something cute happens, like Ted picks up a second one and then everybody that's got 2 has the least or something like that. And even more disasters here. I can't see what disasters are which, but that maybe it's entirely possible that this lot won't be picked up by any player. If it's a negative enough and it's the wrong kinds of negatives, players might just actively avoid picking it up before the end of the round. You get a soft draw here, but I think David's saying pass. I think they're all saying pass as he goes to grab more stuff. Rules-wise, just FYI, if it gets all the way filled up, the next player is forced to call raw, but again, it's a soft raw, and then if no one bids on it, they blow up all 8 of those tiles. So we're at 6 of those 8, and disaster tiles always blow up 2 things. So, you know, if you want to look at it, this is a net +1 tile. I can't tell which tiles are which and what the penalties are, but the players are going to indicate to us now how important this is, as David's going to be forced to call a soft raw here. Ted looks like he does a pass. Loyd's going to evaluate what he has to sacrifice to get there. My guess is that one of those blows up sieves if Ted is passing on it so quickly, which is going to cost him 5 points. If one of them is a Nile destroyer, it kills the flood, which really hurts Loyd and Ted. So it actually might be that David is interested, but actually clearly whatever is being blown up there is not worth the tiles that are gotten, and everybody passes on it. That is not too surprising, seeing a double disaster situation. Lee's relatively happy to see that, as it advances more tiles into the bag, means he's getting closer to drawing more raw tiles, which means it's closer to the end of the round. But he really is out of the round just too early in this round. And he had, you know, some commanding choices. He had like I think a 1, 10, and 13. And I think he pulled the trigger too early on his powerful bidding positions. Now, if things had gone differently and we just went through a glut of drawing a bunch of raw tiles, then I would be saying like, oh, Lee's so brilliant. What a great guy for having gone out early. But that's why it is really important to pay attention to the top of the track. And like I said before, the fact that the first round was so fast means that the proportion of raw tiles left in the bag is more reasonable. So the second round is going to more likely be longer. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. This round has been long enough and there have been few enough raw tiles that I would say the third round goes for like a normal round length. I don't tile count, but I just kind of have a like sense of what that looks like. And obviously that just comes with experience of the game. We've got 5 tiles out here right now. I can't quite tell what they are. One of them's a Pharaoh. One of them's a Nile. Maybe 2 of them are Niles. And David's going to call raw here. If one of them's a Civ that overlaps with Ted's Civ, this is a dream call for him because the other players are not going to be incentivized to take it, and David might get away with getting it with a 3. That being said, having 2 Nile tiles out there, both Loyd and Ted have Niles in a flood. It's 2 points for them. Plus, they're going to be highly incentivized to take a flood next turn. So they can really be considering those Nile tiles as being worth roughly 2 points at this stage. So if there's 2 Nile tiles in there, like bam, 4 points, right? And like all of a sudden this becomes a respectable lot in its own. However, 4 points is not enough for Ted. Ted's behind. Like he needs to be making some good gets to close the gap between the other players as he's in last place right now. Oh man, thank you, Ted. First time I've been able to breathe in 44 minutes. Ted, by the way, like I said, played Acquire, has kind of also messaged me. Seems like a really good dude. Ted, I do mean to actually play the Acquire game with you. I'd love to do that video still. I just have been trying to juggle a bunch of other things in life. And buying a house, did you guys know that it's so much effort to buy a house? So stupid. Loyd's got a tougher call here with the 11. He's in a commanding position, and there's a lot of time left in the round. I think almost surely Loyd is going to pass here. Ted also might be debating how much David wants it. Like if Ted bids the 5 and David does proper want it and bids the 7 over him, then by Ted bidding 5, he's only made it good, right? Like he's only made it so that David's had to pay there. And I can't hear that conversation, but with him like looking at these things, I can't help but wonder if that's exactly what he's debating. Like, does he force David to pay the 7 to pick up this lot? Is it good enough for him? Or is David going to be in the position where he's like, all right, you take it for the 5. That's fine. I've got, 3 bids left. We've got all the time in the world. I'll push my luck 4 days here. Loyd's having a laugh, revealing that he's got a 1 in something else that's probably pretty crappy for bids in the last round. And here he comes with a 5. Moment of truth. David, do you want it or not? Oh, he's thinking about it. That's so interesting. I would have assumed that he had already decided in his mind, given the point of conversation that was happening there, and he was the one that called raw. At this point, I think the players are just like straight up talking about how good they think things are, which is not common that you see that at a final table, that kind of like openness of conversation. I think there's something about raw that has a little bit more of a kibitz value to it. And I don't know if it's because it's the game or the culture of the game or the fact that it's an older game, like maybe just has a little bit more of that vibe. Because like modern gaming doesn't have as many like kibitzing type moments at the table. And we are going to let Ted get stuck with it. And we'll see what he picks up. So we've got the Nile tiles that we mentioned. Oh, I see. And we've got civs. Oh, and thank you, Ted, for stacking those up. So it was 5 points for Ted because it was not negative 5 points for David. So it was 5 points for both of them. But Ted actually benefited from the Nile. So it's a 5 point plus 2 points for each of those Niles. So it's like a 9 point pickup for Ted for the 5, which is great. It's actually like his best pickup of the round, if I remember correctly. So I'm not too surprised. And David, I guess, is just happy to let him take it because the Niles are not as good for David, who doesn't know that he's got a flood. He might not have that kind of infrastructure going for him. And he figures, hey, maybe there's more time for me to get a Civ, before the end of the round here. So he's going to let Ted get out of his way and then just play head to head with Loyd. There is also an advantage of playing head to head in that like the timing is pull, 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 pull until someone calls raw. And so because there's so much time left in the round, these players can actually just keep pulling over and over and over and over again until the game round tells them to call raw. David says, no, this is getting too good. This is the decision point that David has. When he calls raw, he's saying this is good enough that if we pull another tile, I'm afraid that Loyd will take it at 11. And I want to be able to take this at 3. On the other hand, if he doesn't think that Loyd would take it at an 11 with one more tile, he shouldn't be doing this. Now, that looks like it was a God tile. Yeah, that's a God tile. So that's 2 points. Or he can grab something off the board, which again, going head to head, anytime Loyd pulls something that seems spicy for David, he could just be like, all right, I'm going to guarantee that I get that instead of playing head to head with you. David now has a very diverse array of monuments. He picked up a couple Niles there, which are more or less useless for him. So I can see why he called raw there. But I can't help but wonder if they should have pushed his luck a little bit more. Now, this is pretty interesting for Loyd because that actually is a 5-pointer for him. The monument there is a 5-pointer for him because it pairs up with his pair there. But David also doesn't have this if he's collecting a wide set. And so David is going to press the issue and bid here. Loyd's going to pass immediately because it's not good enough. I don't love this by David. It is a 7-pointer, I could say an 8-point get by Loyd, but Loyd has all the time in the world. He's not going to grab 8 points here. I think David absolutely could have pressed the issue here. Now it's a 10-point one, right? Or would have been if he kept that God tile there. So I think that was maybe a mistake on David's part to call a little bit too early. I think he has all the time in the world to put pressure on Loyd. Yes, Loyd's in command, but if David was left with 2 tiles and a gazillion soft raws left to do it, like he could just be drawing until he sees like his dream lots, like for the rest of the round. And this, given that there's a disaster in here, they're going to draw all the way up to 8, I think. Looks like a pair of Nile tiles there, which benefits Loyd, who's got the flood. Looks like another God tile there. That's a 3rd Nile tile and a gold coin there. I just can't tell what the disaster is. That does make a difference in what it is. If it's a Pharaoh killer, it's like, yeah, okay, so that person is going to be guaranteed to be sort of Pharaoh loser for -2 points, but not too much of a nightmare. Instead of David actually, fascinating. Instead of David actually using the force raw, he's going to say, I'm going to use a God tile and swap for flood? Swap for a flood. He says, yeah. Let me score these Nile tiles. Now, Loyd, you're going to draw the 8th tile. And now David's back into being forced to call raw again. Pretty interesting situation. There's 4 Niles there. Again, I can't tell what the disaster is, but that's a lot of points. If we treat the Niles as being worth 2 points now, assuming that a player can get a flood by the end of the game, and that both of them have them right now, it's an 8-point lot plus 3 for the gold. It's an 11-point lot. But clearly whatever that disaster is negative enough for the players. And David also has his eyes set on getting a Civ tile. So there's a Civ tile right there that got pulled. So he could use his God tile to snatch it, but he's got time. And a little awkwardly, we draw another flood here, which means that maybe he is going to be a little bit punished for having used the God tile before. This lot's already pretty nice for Loyd, as it's 5 points there, 6 points, 5 points for the monument, a 6-point for the flood. And then a handful of civs. There's a God tile, which is going to be another 2 points. We didn't see God tiles early, so we're seeing a bunch of them now. And Lee and Ted are just looking on in absolute agony as this round goes on and on forever, and they fall further and further behind. To me, it really seems like the way this round has played out is going to make this a 2-player race between David and Loyd. But I guess we should see when we actually score the round. It's not that Ted and Lee's positions are awful, but they're not exciting either. Lee and Ted are very thankful to see the boat of Ra continue down as the day gets longer. We keep pulling here. Here's another monument. That adds to players' spreads. I think this actually might be David's 8th monument. Yeah, 8th unique monument, which leads to a full array of options here. So it looks like he's going to be using his God tile. It doesn't go into play though. His God tile to claim that, acknowledging that he thinks that Loyd is going to bid on this lot. Ooh, here's another 2 points for Loyd. So Loyd right now is almost certainly going to take this lot. It is worth 5, 7, 9, 10 points. 5 for the monument, 2 for each of the God tiles, 1 for the flood. I'm starting to get good at that. That's sensing the flare here, or the glare here. And then 2 civs, which I can't tell if those are 2 different civs. So this is either a 10 or 15 point lot for Loyd at this point. David, I think, is tempted to call Ra to see if Loyd will bid the 11. It's good enough that he probably will, but does he want to take it if Loyd decides to just let him do it and then get out of the round? For David, this lot is only worth 4 and not -5. So you could argue 9 points. I mean, it's a pretty good lot. Here's 1 extra point for Loyd. Nothing for David, probably. It's a double up, and we've seen some of those 2 tower things are spread all over the place. And we'll flip 1 more Nile tile here for another pair of points. David's going to call Ra here, of course. And then Loyd's got to decide whether he bids the 11 on it. I can't imagine much better than this for Loyd. Even if those civs don't pair nicely, and let's just say they're worth 0 points. It's 5, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. It's a 13-ish point lot. He's going to be hard-pressed to find a 13-ish point lot otherwise. You always have the chance of drawing those disasters. So while I can certainly conjure other lots that would be worth 13 points, for example, something with 2 pharaohs to put him into pharaoh lead is something that's very, very interesting. It is hard to guarantee that that's going to happen. He's looking at his other tile numbers there because he's seeing that he's going to have a 7 and Loyd's going to suck at bidding on the last turn. But I still think there's not much he can do to improve his bidding position. He's either taking the 7 or the 8 that David will eventually use. So that's not going to change, I think, really his evaluation for anything. I do appreciate that he's giving this a fair amount of thought, and it looks like he's kind of comparing or debating other things with other players. Like he's looking over at Ted Civs to see sort of maybe what's left in the game. Maybe Loyd's kind of a big brain, very tile county kind of guy. I personally find that just tracking the number of like X tiles that have gone out of the game to be very exhausting. The only thing that I'll track generally are monuments that I'm interested in. Once I've started paying attention to them, like do any of those blow up? And then floods. If I'm in a position where I have a bunch of Niles, I'll try to count how many floods have gone through in the game, just to have a sense of like, do I need to panic on the last round? Do I need to use my God tiles in the way that David did? Or aggressively bid for a flood, or our flood's going to be plentiful enough? And I believe it says in the older versions of the game, and I believe it says in this new version of the game, how many of each tile are in the bag overall. So you can get just kind of like a rough sense. You're not going to go through all of them, but just having an idea of like, oh, we're 2 or 3 rounds through the game, and we've drawn, I think in this game, maybe like 6 flood tiles. I haven't been counting, but like, we see 3 out right now. I think 1 was blown up. I don't remember anyone scoring them in the first round. So like floods are going to be quite plentiful, I think, in the last round. All right, now we see a lot of player evaluation. I don't know what it is that they're debating here with these different tiles and resources, but I don't think it should matter too much to Loyd. I guess he's having a hard time because he knows he's behind, so he wants to score quite a big lot for this, but maybe he's passed. Maybe it's on to David, and he's deciding whether it's points for him. For David, it's 4, 5, 6 for the Nile, 7 for the flood, and then not -5 for the civs, so 12 points. 12 points is well worth it, I think, for his 8 get. 4, 9... 10, 11, 12. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a worthwhile lot for David again, especially in his position where he is bid loser to Loyd. If they make a lot that's even more amazing, he's still gonna have to grab it. He's debating whether when he doubles up on the various monuments, if that's going to hurt him. Given the amount of those twin towers and double square castles that we see in play already, those monuments are probably nearly worthless. But there's always a chance that he grabs like the very last one that's out there. I think the two towers one has one already in the Destructo bag. Yeah, man, this is an awful lot of kibitzing at this table. I'm not listening to their audio right now, but that's so fascinating how that is going. Back to the instance where I'm happy that played it. And we've decided both of them are playing so greedy. Fascinating. I'll be curious to see if this works out better for them. So what did I say? Like, I want to say it was like 15-ish, or it was somewhere. It was more than 12, but I think it's around 15. Fascinating. Maybe David also just wants to be able to apply pressure to Loyd rather than letting him just kind of draw and play by himself with all that time left. But man, that's a greedy choice. It's a greedy choice on both players' parts. I'll be very curious to see how this pans out. And they can do that. Like this is really, really uncommon that you're going to be in this kind of position where players can make a choice like that. That's like absolutely bananas. Loyd blessed again with this monument here. Ooh, and then David draws the monument that's good for him. So suddenly both of them are in exactly the same position. Those are both 5-point monuments for each of them. Now the extra other monuments are good for Loyd and not good for David. Well, I mean, I guess it puts David in a position where he could triple up if it comes up later. But for Loyd, it's like his first instances of them, so they are probably worth 1 point. I guess that's not true with the Sphinx, but doubling up is just as good as for him as it is for David. Looks like we see a pharaoh here. Is that second tile a sieve maybe? I can't quite see what the sixth tile is. The seventh one is definitely a Nile. And the eighth one is a Nile here. This lot looks respectable, but also strictly worse than the last one. It depends on what the sixth one is. But for Loyd, it's 2, 4... So for David, I guess it's better because it is indeed a sieve. So let's see what he grabbed out of it. Nile, 2 points. Nile, 2 points. Nile, 2 points. I think that was a flood, though. So it's 5. Nothing, or 5 points for the monument. 10. Not -5 for the sieve. So he was rewarded. He got 15 points out of this and was rewarded for being greedy. Because I think I counted 12 before. And a lot of that came off the back of him drawing that trapezoid monument. And now Loyd here is just pushing his luck. He's got all the time in the world to draw up to sort of what he wants. It's not what you want an 11 to be doing. You usually want like a crappier tile to be doing that. But we've gone without drawing Raws for quite long. I'm not surprised like Loyd's shaking his head, but like this is sort of what the odds are going to look like at this point. I think he's going to have basically one crack at this. And he's just essentially praying he doesn't draw a disaster. Yeah, time's running out here. Like, we've gone so long without drawing raw tiles. It is unfortunate to draw 4 in a row. So now he's got to decide whether he bids the 11 because the next raw tile that he draws kills him. Right there, I see a sieve tile, a Nile tile, and then maybe it's another sieve tile. So let's pretend that it's their friendly sieve tiles, and that would be 5 points. Nile tiles 2, so 7 points, which is definitely a lot less than he would have scored earlier. But 0 for pulling a raw tile out of the bag is really, really bad. Now, after the first round, Loyd is definitely behind David. David's in the driver's seat. He's got more endgame scoring. They have equal amount of Nile tiles, equal amount of Pharaoh tiles. There is no advantage that Loyd has that David doesn't also have. In terms of scoring for this round, David's got more in Niles. They're equivalent in Pharaohs. The only thing that Loyd has going over David is gold. He has to push his luck. And if he misses here, he's out of the game. But if he doesn't, he's just going to lose to David in the last round anyway. So I really respect this choice on Loyd's part. Looks like he drew something that was kind of a nothing burger there, and then he draws the raw tile, which is going to kill him. I think it was too greedy earlier in the round to not take the 15 points or whatever it was, or 13 points. I think that might have made a really big difference. And obviously, we can't go back and say, oh, well, if he's off by 13 points at the end, because it's going to change the way that he plays for the rest of the game. He doesn't make this very risky play that he makes here if he's in a slightly different position. But David is so far ahead at this stage that he has to make a greedy play. So I really like that he made that greedy play. He was punished by it. I just think that he shouldn't have, in my opinion, he didn't need to be greedy just yet. I think that he could have earlier in the ground grabbed that huge lot for himself, moved on with his life. David would have been in exactly the same position because he would have drawn the same tiles that we saw. Maybe actually would have drawn like 1 or 2 tiles more, been a little bit better, scored a few more points. But yeah, pretty rough round for him. Players are scoring stuff. I want to actually go back for a second to try to get the scores that they have here. So for Loyd, we're going to score 5, 6, 7, 8. Great. And yeah, I think it's going to be 8 for him. For Lee, we're going to score, I think, 5, 10. Five for the Pharaohs, 5 for the Civs. David's going to score 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And not -5. Ted is going to score 10 and 5 for 15. But he's going to lose 2 for being Pharaoh loser. So he's going to get 13 there, which in total now puts us at +8 for Loyd, +11 for Ted, +14 for David, and +15 for Lee. So that's just points ignoring endgame scoring with the monuments and everything like that. So I don't remember exactly the lot that we were talking about that Dave would score the points in, but he would have scored a few more. Well, whatever. There's no way for me to do it because we were talking also about end game points and some mid game points and everything like that. But pretty close in terms of the scores that people have garnered over the course of the game, right? 8 for Loyd, 15 for Lee, 14 for David, 11 for Ted. All close in terms of scores that they've already accumulated. The thing is that Lee, Ted, and Loyd all have 3 points in monuments right now. And Loyd's double up doesn't matter because I think we've seen enough of those square castles go away that they're toast. On the other hand, David's got the full array, 8 for 15 points, and another 5 points. So he's got 20 points in endgame scoring, 17 more than the other players. So the players here are looking to close a 17-point gap to beat David in the last turn. That means that they have to play absolutely crazy, that David can't get anything. It's a really tough position for them to be in. Loyd's got some pretty crap bidding tiles going into the last round at a 1 to 11. Lee's got a 9, 10, 12, which gives him an absolutely commanding position in the last round. Ted's got the 13 and the 6 and the 4. David's probably got a bunch of random stuff. Even though we just saw a huge run of raw tiles go on, that second round went on for so long that I'd expect the third round to be a little bit shorter. David should basically get in and get out. Anything that's worth 5 points or whatever, he's going to grab and be done with it. If he can get a tile, if he can get a flood and he can get a sieve, it's basically game over. I think that it's more or less impossible for the players to catch him if he's going to score those, 11 points, right? 6 for the Nile with the flood, and then not -5 or 5 points for the civilization is going to be probably enough to just make it so that the other players can't compete with him. The other thing with David's having the full 8 set of monuments here that kills other players is that we're not going to see anybody stack up to 5 monuments for full 15 points. We've seen a couple monuments blow up too, so I don't even know we're going to see other players get to 4 monuments in any of the columns. And the thing is, David's got a couple things like the Sphinx, for instance. I think that there are more Sphinxes in the bag. That's 5 points for him and maybe 1 point for other players. So the valuation is going to be a lot harder for those players to catch up on. Lee's probably going to keep the position of lead Pharaoh here. It's possible that, maybe Loyd or David makes a run at it if kind of a bunch are drawn in a row. But there is no way that I think there's really no. I mean, there's a way. It's unlikely though that Lee's going to lose it, but Lee unfortunately has no Nile tiles, so no way to cash in on floods in the last round like other people do. So he's really looking for some like God Civ pulls to like score an additional 5 or 10 points there. Side kitty. That's there's a double video beneath me and covering it. You already see enough of my living room that I didn't want to cover all of it, and we'll get kicked off here with Ted. Looks like we lead with a couple Pharaoh tiles. Pretty boring pulls at the beginning, although this is exactly what I was talking about Lee doesn't want to see. You see him shaking his head. Like two Pharaoh tiles out there means that it's a threat on his position. And then a penalty of some sort. That looks like a kind of deserty thing, so I'm going to guess that that's a Nile desert. I've played the new version like one time, by the way, so I think if they were playing the like 19 or like the 2001 version or whatever it is, I'd be a lot more likely to see the tiles. And I've made up 2001. I don't actually know what year it was published, but I'm accustomed to playing the old version of Raw. Cardboard chits. I guess these are cardboard too, but these are like big chunky cardboard. I'm talking about crappy cardboard that if you spilled a cup of water on, you'd be pretty unhappy about. Lee bidding the 9 here tells me that that is indeed an arid thing. He basically gets no penalty for it. And he's keeping control of his pharaohs. And like, I see why that's important to him, but this is also just a losing proposition. I think that's absolutely a mistake on Lee's part. It's great for him to stay in charge. Oh, was it kill 2 pharaohs instead? So he grabbed a god tile and a pyramid? Well, then it wasn't a threat. I really don't think that was a good get for Lee. Like I said, he has to score a crazy amount of points to win. And in this case, where it is a winner-take-all game, just doing okay is not enough. He does pick up a big number tile, so he may be able to get to steal 5 points from somebody at the end of the round. For having the most sum of numbers, but yeah. Ted calls a raw here? Oh, did David call a raw? Why is David calling a raw? What is happening? Oh, I see. It was a soft raw. Players were just actually like debating whether they would buy this or not because he drew the red tile. Yeah. They just generally have been so fast about like snap passing around the table that they haven't done that. I thought that like someone was genuinely. Also, generally what I do is like put the raw sideways if it's a soft raw. And Loyd's going to go ahead here and call a hard raw because his 1 can essentially grab himself a god tile there. The god tile can turn into a civ tile or a flood tile, which are going to be worth 5 points. So even though it looks like it's only a 2-point get for him, he knows that there's a lot of time left between now and the end of the round, and he could grab something important from a lot that's maybe good for other players, or that he doesn't think that he can win. So that's an okay get, but again, it's not going to close this gap. I think if I was in this position, I would be playing greedier. I would end up losing by even more points because of playing that way. But there's, I guess, an outside chance that by playing greedy, I would be rewarded. So generally, the problem is that when I lose this game, I lose in 4th or 5th place. I don't play for 2nd or 3rd. And that definitely makes a difference in terms of how you're going to evaluate lots when you're paying attention to other people and how they're doing and everything. Obviously, you can't take notes on how many plus points it seems like people are at, but I think everybody at this table knows that David's well ahead at this point in time. No question about it. Ted's having a laugh about just advancing to the end of the round. This isn't what we want to see. We're all in trouble. Everybody knows we're in trouble. Let's just keep it going. They're having a good laugh at how doomed they are. I love that. More Pharaoh tiles. You hate to see it when you're Lee. And I gotta say, there's something about placement of tiles and bidding. There's something about the expressiveness of people like dropping stuff in play that tells me a lot more about the player's emotional states than we see in a lot of the other games that I'm reviewing. That's pretty amazing. Love that. I'll be curious to see, because I'm also going to do the Raw Grand Semifinal. I think that I have things to say about Raw, and this has been really fun. I mean, just going through this at this breakneck speed, I feel like the closest I've ever felt to a sports announcer while doing these board game commentaries. So that's pretty good. Loyd's debating whether he wants to push it here. I mean, this doesn't do anything for him. Doesn't really do anything for anybody. Oh, I see. He's debating whether he wants to tie up Lee with the Pharaoh situation. No, you need more. You just need more. David would call it maybe, because if David ties up, it's like maybe an additional 5 points for him. Hilariously, we draw a third Pharaoh here just to completely put the threat on. Lee, I think, is just going to keep drawing tiles. Might as well, if they're going to overtake him, might as well make it as good as possible. He's the one that can win the bid here. So yeah, keep spicing it up. He's got big tiles. I like it a lot. David's going to call it for sure, because if he gets this, he's extremely happy. The question is, how much does anybody want to fight for it? I think Ted for sure bids something on it, because 3 Pharaohs puts him tied for first. I think that's a Nile tile was the last one drawn. And then it's like a point for the Sphinx. I don't know. It's not a lot. I think I'd probably bid the 4 if I was Ted. But, you know, the difference between the 4 and 6 is just essentially how you're related to David, because you're sandwiched 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And Lee's going to bid the 10 so that he can keep command of the Pharaohs here, which, you know, like I said on his last bid, I don't think is good enough. He's just making his point of pride. He's like, I am god of Pharaohs. You can, it's a flood tile, so that is better for the other players. But yeah, he just says, I'm king of the Pharaohs. You can't take this away. King of king, god of gods. I'll have my 1 point of pride in the course of this game. Nile tile. Flood tile. Probably worthless monument. David should call Ra. A 3 here to take the flood tile is a completely reasonable. I think it's a little bit of a greedy choice for him to do that. That is now an incredibly good lot for David. The other players can't let him have it, which actually means that Ted should pull more things, because David can't fight for it. So they can be in a position where they make it so that David can't win it, because David will bid the 7 on it. It's the 7 points for floods plus 5 points for the trapezoid. Completely puts this game out of reach, I think, for other people. Soft Raw here is a dream pull for David. Woof. Lloyd's debating whether he bids the 11, but it's just not good enough for him. It can't make the difference, so he pushes it. Like I said, David will bid the 7 for it, and Ted acknowledges that he can't let him have it. It's really sad, because it's not that great for Ted. I mean, it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's an 8-point get for Ted. So I said it's not that good, but 8 points is actually a respectable lot. It's not make up 20 points difference in my 3 actions good, but it could be as part of the journey there. Part of that journey includes David getting basically nothing this round, which is why I said that I think David should have called Ra on the original flood. There's a sieve. This is not negative 5 points for everybody at the table. 1 point for the Nile tile there. And so, yeah, Ted's like, well, if I call this now, I bid my 4, this is 5 points. Normally a very, very reasonable question to ask yourself. However, again, that doesn't help you in the journey of making a 20-point deficit. So I don't love this raw call, but maybe what he's trying to do is bait David out into bidding. But I think the only way you win this game is by making big lots, David not getting them, and the round ending. Ted, unfortunately, is in a position where he just can't get stuff. He's outboxed by players around him. So actually, now that I'm saying it out loud, maybe Ted doesn't have any choices. He's got the 4 and the 6. He's outboxed by every other player. His only real hope here is to get some decent lots with the things that he has, end the round, and then hope people just draw rah, rah, rah off the top. So I said at first I didn't like Ted calling the raw, but I'm going to take it back. I think this is probably his only real path to victory, is a complete dud for David with the numbers that Ted has, he can't really play that greedy. He gets something with that 4 and then prays the round ends, and that gets him as close as possible. I think even then it won't be as close as possible. I think he's positively doomed, but I do like that is his line of play. So that's a walk back from me, folks. More pharaohs. Pharaoh from our pharaoh. That's a monument killer. Monument killer is not hurtful to David because he's got 2 pairs. In fact, this really only hurts other people. Currently, this is really a nothing burger of a lot anyway. The pharaoh does practically nothing. And most people have at least 1 monument they get rid of. So this is a negative 1 point lot right now. Gold. Plus 2 point lot because it's 3 points. And I said the other thing was like negative 1-ish. That's not enough. You got to keep going, Loyd. Oh, he's considering putting his 2 up into whatever was bid there, a 6 for the end of round scoring. Or maybe he just compulsively checks his face down tiles. Yeah, I don't know. That's not great. I mean, if I'm David, I bid the 3 here. Why not? It's 3 points. Like, he's, again, in a commanding position. Why not take the 3 extra points? Like I said, I think if he takes 3 points, 5 points, 6 points along the way, he's in really good shape. We said there's a lot of floods left in the bag, but we're not drawing them. I mean, we've drawn like 2 or 3 of them, but I'm pretty sure there's more. I'm pretty sure there's a lot more. I guess Loyd's 2-bid is fine because he has the same hope that Ted does, is that David just gets nothing. So by forcing the issue and getting a little bit of extra points here, that's a flood. Big deal. Ted will call raw. No? Okay. Loyd's going to grab that flood unless something weird happens here with his god tile. Ooh, well, something weird does happen. We pull a raw. So now Loyd's got to debate whether he bids the 11. Yeah, you see him with the frustration there. 6 points. It's not great. But also, the game might just end. So I think his path to victory, I mean, the 6 points isn't enough. We know it's not enough. I think he knows it's not enough. So, you know, in a different kind of game where it was closer, there's something very interesting about bidding the 11. It's extremely unlikely that Lee's going to take this from you. It's basically worth nothing to him. And then essentially just praying that the game ends subsequently. Instead, David's going to get this for 5. This is a 4, 5, 6, 7 point get. And I think this is just game over. Unless like dreamy stuff happens, I think Loyd needed to take it at 11. That gets him as close as possible, but I guess it doesn't get him into winning. So I said that and I'm wrong because he needs to get himself into a winning position for it to be worthwhile. But this just makes it so that what a winning position is defined as is even more difficult. This is a 7-bit. Oh, snap. Soft raw here. David's going to go ahead and bid the 7 because it's 5 points. Yeah, like we said, the Sphinx could come out. It's 5 points for him. It's not points for anybody else. I think he could have gotten away with just bidding the 3 on it, but maybe he was just worried that Ted was going to sandbag him. Yeah, I guess he was just worried that Ted's going to sandbag him. That's fair. Yeah, and they're debating, like, do I just hoist myself on the petard here? Take 0 points? But, you know, frankly, if you weren't going to bid the 11 or 12 for the Nile tiles, like, now it's just sort of a despondency, but it's a mistake, right? Because they were not willing to bid the 11 or 12 for the water points, which are actually points for everybody, even if it's only just a few for Lee. So it doesn't make any sense to do otherwise. I think actually in David's position here, he should call raw again, swap that 3 up into a 7 and hope to not be point loser. I think that would have been the line of play for him here, because I don't think he's getting anything else. Not with the 3. The game is going to end before that happens. I mean, I guess unless he's thinking that, hey, everyone's just going to be really greedy because they have to try to beat me. So I'll have something so I can bid. But, we draw one more raw tile, game's over. I don't know what Ted's debating here. He can't call raw because... Oh, he's debating exactly what I said. Yeah, actually, I get it. If he calls raw here and he uses his 4 and upgrades it to a 7... he's just making it so that his end game point numbers. Actually, I do think that Ted calling raw would be extremely reasonable here, but it's super marginal and it's not going to help him anyway. Sure, let's pull some of the disaster instead. What kind of disaster is that? Is it a Pharaoh disaster? I think it is, because it looks kind of greenish on the bottom. Yeah, still just a net positive for David, right? Because +5, -2 for being the Pharaoh loser. Here's a gold. This actually is a totally respectable lot for Lee. He's going to change the 2 into 3 gold? No, that's crazy, dude. You got the 12. And he's going to take a 6? No, you just win whatever bid. No, he doesn't care about the Pharaoh Killer. Save your god tile, Lee. It's 2 points. Sometimes people just have the sense of they want to use it. So he downgrades his 2 point into 1 point so that David can't get any points. That to me is a cut off your nose to spite your face kind of situation. You're not going to be surprised by this, but I'm going to say that David should call raw here. He upgrades his 3 into a 7 if people let him take it. It's -2 points for the Pharaoh, +1 point, +3 points for the gold. This is a net positive for him. That's even better than what I'd suggested last turn. Ted's going to think about exactly what I just mentioned, right? Like, for him, he's already Pharaoh loser. This is actually just strictly +3 points for him, and his 4 upgrades to a 7. I also think that Ted should call raw here. The reason is that, like, if a lot is respectable in any way, Loyd and Lee are going to take it, and then the game's going to end at some point. You have to be insanely lucky for there to be 2 lots that are respectable that Loyd and Lee are going to pass on, that you're going to wind up getting before anybody draws a raw tile. I mean, I guess it depends on how many tiles are left back in the bag. Like, people can feel the bag and get a sense of what that looks like, because I think there's exactly enough raw tiles for the game to end. So, if you can feel that there's 20, left in the bag, then you are just waiting to roll that nat 1, see what happens from there. All right, he pulls a Pharaoh tile, which is kind of a nothing burger here. This set is very mediocre for Loyd. He's got the 11. I think he should draw another tile. He doesn't... This is not an upgrade for him in the way that it is for others, and he's second for bids. So I think he still is interested in pushing him. Yeah. Well, while he's thinking about it, why don't I stop the track so I can go pull the endgame scores to tell you officially. Hold on. All right, we're back. And Loyd landed on the answer, which is he's got to push his luck. And he has more commanding position to do it. I don't think there's any reason really for him to call raw here. All right, another Pharaoh tile here just for fun. Kind of makes that Pharaoh Killer a complete wash. So now this is just proper gold for everybody. Lee's going to keep drawing. You're not going to be surprised, but I think David should call raw. Here he goes. Ted's happy to take this. This is just strictly better than what it was before, but also exactly the same in most ways. The thing that it does for him is it pretty much puts him into not Pharaoh last place. Actually, in fact, it might cost David 2 points by putting him into Pharaoh last place. So actually, the other players are glad to see those Pharaohs get pulled out in that way. Loyd's debating buying this, but it doesn't do enough for him. I think that he probably just lets Ted take it and pushes his luck. I mean, it's insane. Like there's nothing. I can't envision anything that he would pull that's good enough. But getting a flood tile and a sieve tile is 10 points, so that's at least respectable. It's maybe a little greedy to want that with just one, raw tile left and the other player holding a 12. But hey. Normal Nile tile, not too exciting, especially for Loyd. Ooh, death. Is that death of civilization, maybe? Just going to make it so that the leftover stuff isn't good. You see Ted dancing over there, so I think it probably is the death of Civ. And then Loyd will very cleverly use his God tile to grab that Civ, so he's just not going to mess with this at all. Ted's pretty hype over there. He's calling rah, rah, rah. He wants the round to end, which is legit. Here we go. Rah, rah, rah. Oh, interesting. David doesn't get penalized here, so he's debating whether he takes 1 point. And I think he does. It doesn't flip over like that. There you go. Yeah, he called raw. I like it. Also penalizes, like it gets him out of the. Oh, it's 3 points for him because it pulls him out of last place with Ted there. Yeah. 3 points is a no-brainer for David. I mean, I was advocating for him taking basically 0 points earlier. It doesn't really improve his tile situation much, like the numbers on his tiles. But hey, it doesn't do anything for you, Loyd. You got to keep pulling. You need a flood. Oh, did he call raw? He's trying to force Lee. He's being cute. He thinks that Lee will bid the 12 and get out of his way. And then Lee says, I'm not interested. I want more. And that'll kill Loyd. It's a greedy choice on his part to push Lee's hand, but at the same time, I see why. It's a cute play. He's already in trouble, so why not be cute? And then Lee's just going to play this solo game until the end here. Let's start tallying up what folks' scores are going to look like for this round, with the exception of Lee. So I'll start over with Loyd. There it is. So Loyd is going to just score 3 points for the round for his raw tile. That's pretty much that. Lee is going to score +5, -5 because he doesn't have Civ. So +5 for the Pharaoh, -5 for the Civ, and then +1 for the flood tile. David's got 3, 6, 7, 8, -5 for no Civ, so +3 for David. And then Ted's going to have the best round scoring, 3, 6, 7, -2 for Pharaoh loser is 5, +3 for the gold is going to make him getting 8 this round. And then we have David is picking up his 15, 20, 25 that we talked about as endgame scoring. We see that Ted is going to be picking up 5 for endgame scoring. We see that Loyd is going to be picking up 4 for endgame scoring. And we see that Lee is going to be picking up 6 for endgame scoring. And then I'm not sure if I tracked it correctly. I'll check later for my own curiosity, but I did pull the final scores. We have David at 47, Ted at 39, Lee at 32, and Loyd at 25 to round out the game here. So, like I said, a pretty big gap that they needed to close. David didn't have an exciting last round there at all, but he did manage to pick up a flood, which was one of the 2 things that I said he needed in order to win the game, and he won handily, even with picking up just one of those things. So, He was, as we talked about, really, really far ahead. A lot of times people win this game because they play the valuation game and they get little edges over their opponents here and there. In this instance, David really won the timing game. In the first round, he saw that raw thing was coming hard and fast. He got his bids in and he got out as fast as possible. And then the bag rewarded him by ending the round shortly afterwards, hurting the other players. Even the way that it was, he didn't get insane lots. So David was ahead after the first round, but he wasn't blowing them away after the first round. It was really the second round where he got super ahead. Lee and Ted had a lot more control in the second round, and they were playing normal raw. But what happened is that the game was going to go long. Part of the reason for that is that the round in the first round did not go very long, but even still, I think the luck was even more in David's side in terms of how long that round went. So his crappy tiles meant that they turned into very good things. Him and Loyd got into basically this heads up play where they had a lot of time and a lot of wiggle room to do things. To the point that they were making insane passes, more than 10-point lots, that they said, nope, I'm not interested in taking those 10-point lots. And then, Loyd pushing his luck. He pushed it a little bit too far, and the bag then punished him for that, basically taking him out of the game for the second round. And catapulting David into just a monumental victory, basically, in the second round. I think the only way to catch up would have been for Ted or Lee to have something pretty wild happen in the third round, or for them to get really lucky and David just end up getting nothing. That was Raw, everybody. I actually had an incredibly fun time doing this over these past 80 minutes. I am going to be doing the Raw semifinal. Now that I'm getting good at the glare, I'm probably going to be even better at that. And that will be interesting because it's with players who are, I know, all very sharky players, but they don't have the experience of this game. So I'll look forward to reviewing that. That's going to be a little bit of a different vibe. But hopefully this is helpful, especially to all you WSBG hopefuls out there who don't know that much about Raw. Enjoy, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Bye.